Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, another hot day. We've had some hot ass weather lately, and it's been amazing. The last few years, like August, we're at like second week of August. It, a lot of the times it would start cooling off quite a bit by August, but now it's been like this period of like prolonged heat, and it's been amazing. So yeah, it's been awesome. I'm on break from school. We summer camps where I work uh, have come to an end for the season already, and so I'm on break right now for like a week and a half. So it's pretty nice. I've been just kind of relaxing. We got back from tour last week and finished up the last date this past weekend, and so yeah, it's just been nice, kind of chilling out, getting a little bit of practicing in, getting back the thing that I miss. It's funny because I wasn't away all that long, but about a week or so. But there was a good, well, full week, maybe a little bit more of where I didn't make any videos because I just didn't have the time, or I was away from my laptop, and that's the thing I was looking forward to the most, was like just getting back to like being able to chill out at night and watch a movie and then do a show. And so I realized how much I love doing this. And so also, and being out of town, whenever that's one thing that happens to me now. Like whenever I go out of town for a while, I love going to visit and see new places and having like cool and unique experiences, which is one of the reasons that I love about one of the main reasons why I love going out on the road for music and doing some touring is I mean, not only it's the gigs themselves, like it's a lot of work obviously, and you gotta hopefully do a good job for each show, and you have to like focus. And it's a lot of all the variables around that. But on the other side of it, there's also obviously there's a lot of traveling involved, and there's a lot of you have to sleep in different places that you're not accustomed to, but you get to try some new food and some new kinds of cuisine. You meet some real interesting people. You go to some really awesome places. So it's for me, it's like when I do the tour thing, I treat it as like, I don't know, part of it's like half and half, where I treat part of it as like a um, work, obviously, but then the other side, it's all it's like a vacation. So, but I miss home more and more each time. I mean, I did three tours this within the last year or so, so it's been really nice. I did it. We Bookhead Sweet Tooth, who we just finished up the tour. We toured last summer, and it was in July 4th weekend. This year we did it the first week of August, and then this past spring I went on tour with Osmia, and that was a pretty big tour. So I it was all like super fun, and just it's a lot of work, but just great. So we're looking forward to doing some more. I think Osmia, we're they're putting together another tour for later this year, which will technically be next year, and we're going to do another road trip. And I think we might be going a little bit further. I think the first show might be in DC. So looking forward to doing that again. But that's up until about a year or a year and a half ago. I actually had not been touring in a long time. I had some tour experience before last summer's bigger tour with Bookhead Sweet Tooth. Mostly um, the first 4 or 5 years with my band Quantum. The band's been around for 10 years, which is crazy to me. But the first couple of years or so, we were playing local gigs and things like that. But then I started booking these little tours along the way, and we were going on these treks of where we were playing. We started playing quite a bit in New York, and then we actually went to Canada a few times. We went to Connecticut and Massachusetts, and a few different areas that were very cool. Vermont, and then before that, and we did that probably about 3 or 4 times. And then before that, I was in another band, the 220s, and we started to do some tours like that. And then had a little bit of experience playing with this one singer-songwriter where we were going on these New England road trips. So, relatively small scale tours. These tours that I recently did were a little bit more were a little bit more expansive, a little further. But I those early experiences that I did with touring, and again, these were things that I kind of put together, mainly around Quantum. They were like, some were good, some were not so great, but overall it was a good experience. But these tours that I've been doing have been much better, yeah, much more fun and more of an adventure and a little bit more organized and all those things. So anyway, but it's great to be home, to be back to watching movies and talking about them. So, and again, I want to thank people who have been supporting this channel and commenting on the videos and subscribing. So, I love that. That's why I do it. So today's show is on. I went to Opera House Video on Saturday last week and got some new movies. And so I got 3 new horror films. And so I wanted to, I try to, and then Sunday I went to Bull Moose, and I got a bunch of really low budget exploitation movies, which I'm super excited to talk about and to start watching. And so I got a lot of movies to talk about, so I'm super excited. Sunday was amazing. I went to Bull Moose, and I couldn't believe. Next time I go to buy movies, I'm definitely going to go to Waterville. I was amazed by. There were so many titles, so many movies to choose from. It was almost overwhelming. And again, 98% of those movies that I buy when I go to Bull Moose are much older films. The decades that I love, and my favorite decade being the 70s, 80s. And the last few years, I've been really exploring, getting a lot of movies, like trying to trace back some of the roots of, within the world of exploitation, especially horror films and giallo films, and tracing it back. So I've been getting a lot of older films too, in the 60s, from the mid to late 60s, and even before that. So it's been really awesome, a really awesome journey, like taking that deep dive. But with all that being said, I like to really try to stay, pretty contemporary, and I like to keep my finger on the pulse of what is coming out, new movies, and try to see new movies. Obviously when I go to the theater, and I've been going to the theater a little bit more the last year or so. Obviously those are all new films, and then when I go to Opera House Video, that's usually where I go to rent new releases, new movies, new DVDs, Blu-rays. So this one, I did a show on 2 movies, Final Destination, Bloodlines, which I will be posting really soon. It's almost done uploading. That movie, out of the 3, was easily my favorite. I was really surprised on how super entertaining and kind of awesome this movie was. Pretty good for. I consider myself a fan of the franchise, but this one was really, really good, and I was very surprised on how much I liked it. And then the other film that I did a show on, which I just uploaded, was a new sci-fi movie called Ash. It was directed by Flying Lotus. Who Flying Lotus is an amazing electronic artist who I have a few of his albums and I've been a fan of his music for a while. And he directed a movie called Ash, which is like definitely a sci-fi horror movie. That movie was, well, I said it in the review, and I've kind of talked about it in this way, but I think it's an example of something that's got style over substance. Visually, it was really great. Music was really cool, and kind of that whole world building, that the atmosphere was pretty cool. But and I will say, it was very influenced by a lot of Italian horror films. There's I saw an interview with Flying Lotus, and he was saying on how he was really inspired by Dario Argento films, in particular Suspiria. So I was like, okay, that's a that's a thumbs up for me. But the story and everything else, the characters and especially the story were, I don't know, I felt like they were just kind of non-existent. And then the movie I'm going to be talking about today is a new film that just came out called Hell of a Summer. And this movie, well, it was. I had heard about this movie, Hell of a Summer. It just came out on DVD, Blu-ray. It was directed by Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brink. Finn Wolfhard is, I'm not all that familiar, but I think he was an actor in the Stranger Things, the real famous TV show, and he's done a bunch of other things, but this was his first movie kind of directing. And this movie is definitely like, it was marketed as like an old school slasher movie. And surprisingly, it's not really a slasher film. I mean, it is, but then it's not. Um, I was I was really disappointed with this movie. And again, I try to give everything a chance. I try to, even if a movie, like I typically like films that have that very kind of slow burn pace. I like films that are slow. But again, there's always that balance of, even if it's slow and maybe there's, say, literally not a lot happening, you're still getting, lots of information along the way, and it will still, the story will still pull you in, and it will be really engaging. I like movies also that are just, like a wild animal that's let out of the cage. It will just kind of explode on the big screen right away. But I typically like films that have that build up and kind of the cool setup, where you're being introduced to characters, and the whole kind of story, the premise, and the eventual, say, plot reveal is slowly, being opened for you, and I like that pace a lot. And so I had heard about this movie, Hell of a Summer, and it was definitely marketed as like a slasher film. And so I rented it last night. I rented it on Saturday. And I watched it like the night before last. And the thing is like, it's got such a great setup. This movie has a really awesome setup. It's You feel like you're in for a really great ride. I felt like I was in for a really great ride. I'm going to be watching this, kind of retro slasher film. The opening sequence is kind of awesome for this movie. It really is. And the basic premise of this movie, again, the story, the basic premise of this movie is, or the setup is, just kind of standard 101 slasher territory, where you have a group of young people or teenagers in a cabin by a lake, and they get picked off one by one, and there is a mass killer going around picking off all of these people. that's the basic premise. Like that's the general setup, and that was the feeling that I got when I watched this movie, especially the first part of it, the opening. And a lot of the times, you want for a movie, you want there to be you want, and I think it's definitely something that the filmmakers want and crave. You want a really strong opening for a film to grab people's attentions, and you want a really good ending. You want to kind of stake your claim, and this movie does a really good job with that. But then the kills. There's two really good kills in the beginning of this film. The atmosphere is really great. It feels like a really old school slasher film. It feels, initially it felt like, wow, okay, I'm totally into this. I love the kills are great, the atmosphere, the setup. There's a lot of suspense. They do show the killer early on, who has this kind of devil mask, and the main kill in the beginning is pretty clever, pretty smart, and it's really good. And it felt like, wow, okay, this is gonna have a classic kind of 1980s slasher vibe. And I'm like, right after the opening happened, I was immediately sold, and I'm like, yep, this is gonna kick ass. I was totally on board because the slasher genre is my all-time favorite genre of all time. Like, I'm all about slasher films. That's one thing I try to do with my collection, buying movies. Like, I just bought a movie that's from the mid to late '80s, which is I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of it, but I've never seen it. But I just bought an Australian slasher movie that looks really good, and it's from the later part of the '80s. Never seen it before, and I got it at Bull Moose, so I'm really excited to watch that. But that's one thing for me, I'm all about good slasher films, and any slasher movie. That's one of my focus points as a collector and as a fan, is to buy as many cool slasher films as I possibly can, especially from the '70s or '80s. I mean, if it's from the '70s or early '80s, forget about it. I will buy it instantly. But as soon as I, experienced the opening for Hell of a Summer, I was like, yep, this is totally got that vibe, and yet it's 2025, and I was like, yep, I'm on board. After this very very cool and exciting opening to the film, we're introduced to all of the characters. These young kids are at the summer camp. There's also a few characters who are, the camp counselors, and they are significantly older than the kids. And this film also is kind of a black comedy. It's got a lot of humor. There's some funny moments. I liked some of the characters pretty well, and then it reached a point where I felt like it was starting to kind of drag a little midway through. And I suddenly started to feel that, okay, maybe this really isn't a slasher movie per se. And maybe this film is, or I should say, the slasher element is really kind of this, you know, is really just a small component of what this movie is. Because really, what this movie ended up kind of becoming was, it does have a lot of humor. It's kind of a black comedy, but it's kind of a coming of age story with these kids. That's really what this movie is. It's about these. Essentially, what this movie is about these a group of young kids, teenagers, young people that are staying at this camp, and they are, going through their, trials and tribulations of becoming an adult, and it's a coming of age story. It's not really a slasher movie. And so, like, midway through, the characterizations are pretty good. The characters are pretty good. There's one character in the movie that I did not like, and it was this woman, this girl who is, this kind of, I don't know, she's vegan, and she's very particular about the food she eats, and she's highly critical and judgmental of other people, of their habits, what they eat, and and is also very judgmental of people that don't share her kind of social political views. She's just kind of a pain in the ass in the movie, and she's like super annoying and super pretentious. And I was like, I want to see her die about 5 minutes into the movie. And she is in the movie, but she's just there are things around her character that I just felt were just annoying. And and there's some sequences where it's just her character in the film. And again, characters, they're all, overall the acting is good. It's got some pretty funny moments, and then we're kind of reintroduced to the killer again, the slasher element. And the weird thing is like all of the kills after the first scene, the opening sequence, uh, are all off camera. Like there's no more gore, there's no more creative kills. Everything is right before the kills happen. There's these cuts every time, and the whole kind of slasher vibe or essence of the story is kind of pushed further and further back to where it's almost non-existent in the movie. It's really weird. And again, as a fan of film and just in general, sometimes you go into a show, watching a TV show, watching a movie, and you have this like preconceived notion as to like what it's going to be about, and then in a lot of cases you can be so surprised, and it messes with your expectations, and it's not at all what you thought it was going to be. And there's a lot of cases of that, of where that happens, and that can be really good, like that can be really exciting and engaging. But for this movie, I don't think it landed the mark at all. I think it really um, was this kind of bait and switch scenario, and I'd seen a lot about this movie, like the way it was marketed, and especially the beginning of this film, that this was going to be a full throttle, kind of badass '80s retro slasher film, and it's not at all. Like, and they intentionally like marketed the film that way, which I thought was, I mean, they can do, the filmmakers can do whatever they want to do as far as marketing, whatever. But I think it was kind of deceiving to the public, and I felt like they could still, mess with our expectations as a viewer, but still like deliver to a certain capacity that slasher element, where they can still, like, the focus, the heart of the story could still very much be this, black comedy or a coming of age story. These kids trying to get along, trying to find themselves, trying to answer, personal questions of, who they are, and that could very much still be the focus of the story, but they could still have the slasher element as a component, but it could still deliver, you know, in that regard. But it doesn't. It just like, and all of these annoying cuts for the kills were just like, again, what they were annoying, and I'm like, why did they bill this movie as this one thing, and it's so not that? And then why did they intentionally kind of censor themselves? Like, why did they go out of their way to make this kind of bold statement, but then retract it, in regards to the slasher element, or the essence of the story. And I think because they kind of retract that, and there's all of these cutaways where nothing is in camera anymore when it comes to the kills, it like when we first see the killer in the beginning of the story, uh, he's got this certain kind of intensity to him, and he's got this I was into to him as a character. I thought he was frightening. I loved this devil mask he had. He had this really imposing presence, but all of that went away, and I felt every time they showed him, it was he was just there. That imposing will that you felt that he had was kind of gone, and so it was very strange. And I think again they could have kept all of those things going with what they established, and still made it a coming of age story. And ultimately, all of those elements, especially the slasher element, just got, I felt left behind. I felt like all of that stuff was abandoned, and I kind of checked out at that point, and I was like, man, I want. It made me want to throw in a really good slasher movie to satisfy that itch or that need to see something in that genre that truly represents that style. And ultimately, I didn't make it all the way through this movie. Yeah, it was like I didn't get it. I didn't understand why they essentially kind of canceled themselves, and why did they make those decisions to really mislead the audience. And again, I was thinking about it, and I guess it's like a thing like they were intentionally trying to mess with your expectations, but I think they went too far with it, and I think that they just kind of abandoned um, those things. So again, the movie itself is good. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I mean, it's pretty well directed. This is a debut film from this director. It's pretty well directed. There's some good acting. The script is pretty decent. It does have some good kills in the very, very, very beginning. Um, but ultimately, I kind of checked out of the film because I just was like, no, this is like a bait and switch. And I don't understand why they marketed this film to be what something that it truly wasn't. And I didn't make it all the way through this movie. I didn't make it all the way through it. I kind of checked out, and I'm like, okay, all right, this is an example of they don't make them like they used to. And again, I I love slasher films, but that's one thing. There's another film that came out recently, Heart Eyes, which was another kind of modern day slasher film. And there's been a few of them. Last year, my favorite slasher film that came out, and I think it's just an awesome movie, In a Violent Nature. That movie was just awesome. And again, it did something really different and creative, but yet, at face value, the storyline, the tropes that we expect from the slasher genre, like everything on paper was super straightforward, you know, kind of to a degree paint by numbers, with kids at a camp on a lake getting picked off one by one by a killer. There's some drugs, there's some sex, and all these things, things that we see over and over again in slasher films. But the thing that was so unique about In a Violent Nature was that the whole film was told from the killer's perspective. So it did away with the whole idea of like, kind of the jump scares. You could see these kids getting picked off, but you could see it happening. Like it wasn't that typical surprise that we normally get or set up, because we could see things coming more or less a mile away, but yet it was still really, really well done. And just having that perspective from the killer, seeing everything from the killer's perspective, made what uh, otherwise was very standard, made that movie very unique and very original. And and Hard Eyes too. The other thing about that movie was it was marred down by some characters in that movie that I just felt were just so annoying and ridiculous and not likable. And it tried to be a kind of a romantic comedy slash black comedy. It tried too much. It was too ambitious. It tried very much to be a slasher movie. It had a really bad plot reveal, like with who the killer is. The other thing I don't like about newer slasher films, which in a violent nature, again, that was set in 2025 for the as far as I know, very modern, but it didn't have that glossy look that a lot of newer slasher films have. It was still really gritty. But a lot of newer slasher films, like Hard Eyes, is a really good example. Like I think, well, I don't know. I liked Hell of a Summer a little bit better than that. I did not like Hard Eyes at all. And the that one of the big things I did not like about those films is they felt like early '90s films, but they were every. That's one of the problems with like new slasher films is like every character is they just are too good looking. Everything is kind of glossy and colorful and slick. When I one of the things I love about good slasher movies is that you know the kids look like normal kids. The characters look like normal people. They don't all look like supermodels. And there's like a grittiness to it. It's a little bit dirty. It's not slick, and that's one of the problems I don't like about newer slasher films. Is like everything is slick and it's clean. Slasher films shouldn't be clean. They should be gnarly and nasty. So, yeah, I would not. I would probably not recommend this movie. A Hell of a Summer. I would pass. I do recommend highly Final Destination Bloodlines. Out of the three movies I got, that was easily the best movie and the most entertaining and the most fun I had watching a movie. And it had some pretty gnarly ass kills. I was really surprised, but you're not going to get that in this film, Hell of a Summer, really at all. It's got a killer opening, first 10 minutes, really great. So yeah, I would take a pass on this. So anyway, peace, and we will see you next time.